Rad-Ish. Welcome to Rad-Ish, the podcast where we spotlight people who shape counterculture and champion alternative ways of living through their passions.
Welcome to Rad-Ish. We are here with Lena Hartog. Lena is a PhD candidate at Utrecht University working on emotions, power dynamics, and movements building alternatives. She co-produced The Cost of Growth, a documentary that exposes the exploitative systems behind Europe's growth story and highlights the efforts and solidarity of communities resisting extraction. I got to go to one of these screenings a few weeks ago at Pakhuis de Zwijger, and it was incredible. It was great to do that in person. So I'm really excited to chat with you today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so nice to be here. And it's actually funny, I don't know if you know, but at this stage we've also had a screening and a panel, I think, a month ago.
Incredible.
So it's great to be back here at OT301.
A full circle. Okay, well, I would love to just start off asking you to tell us a little bit about your journey to climate activism in general, like how that happened for you.
Yeah, happy to share a bit. So I'm 34 now, and I think around 12 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was 22, I was studying social sciences, sociology, and I always thought I would focus more on the social topics. And while climate change was on my radar, I thought it was more something for people who focus on ecology. And then I read this book by Naomi Klein called This Changes Everything. And I realized that all the topics I care about, social justice, inequality, would actually exponentially become worse because of the climate crisis. And it's then that I started first making changes in my own life. I think a path a lot of people take, eating vegetarian, changing my behavior, until I met someone from the divestment movement, Fossielvrij. And they were like, come join us, be active at a more collective scale. And that's how I got active. And I've been actually reflecting recently also on how I learned about all of these power dynamics that I'm studying right now in my work. And it really went back to some of my first climate camps where I learned from people like Chihiro Geuzenbroek, who's a climate justice activist, and Lisette Meddens, who started Fossielvrij in the Netherlands. Really learned about why the climate crisis is a power issue and why it's connected to capitalism, to colonialism, and that's how my journey started. So divestment campaigning at the UvA, at the University of Amsterdam, and later more, other European level and all kinds of initiatives I've been involved in.
Awesome. And how do you keep that motivation alive? Like, how do you keep your journey propelling forward, especially in the living in the confines of like capitalist restrictions?
Yeah, I think the most honest answer is I don't always all the time. So I really see my activism coming in waves. So I've had waves of doing a lot, and I've had waves of kind of breathing out and being and focusing on my personal life more. And that has kept me running in the long term. And I think the very first wave of my activism with divestment campaigning, I also felt I had to keep going all the time and kind of coming down from that. And other people might recognize that who have been through activism themselves. I've started to wonder how I can do it more on the long term. And that's how I can do it. And at some point I started searching as well for sources and practices that could help me. And I found a lot of help in the work of Joanna Macy. So Joanna is an eco-philosopher who collected all of these rituals by indigenous communities. I think she could have attributed them even better. She's done already a decent job. And in her work, I've learned how to sit with my emotions, like my grief, my anger, my frustrations around the world more, and host collective spaces for that. So sometimes I do that with friends just to host our grief next to all of the actions and activism we're doing.
I think that is so important, like having nurturing the longevity and the sustainability and like the recognizing the rhythms that we go through in terms of being like fully committing all of my time and then resting and all of that. I think that is really valuable to speak about and hold space for. I think that's cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's really I usually tell people it's both. I think we need spaces for collective grief and collective emotions, and strategy and vision and having an independent way of thinking about the world also gives me actually hope for the long term, because I feel I have the tools to look beyond the politics of today. Because if I would let my hope rest on party politics, for example, I would get depressed very easily. But I found ways to kind of zoom out and be like, what could this time be about if we look in 100 years from now? And then we don't know yet actually what the history books will say about this time, but I can choose which waves and which movements I'm part of that might in the long term be the seeds of a completely new system. And on good days, I can feel that. On bad days, I'm like, holy shit, what a fucking time to be alive.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what I found really moving and great about The Cost of Growth, is that it not only outlined the culprit of economic growth and the pursuit of growth over, not exploiting people and systems and the planet or anything like that. I also found like the movements and the communities that you highlighted to be so inspiring to see people actively right now working on creating those seeds for a different future. And I'm curious, like, what that process maybe was like or is like in the different communities that you got to interview and highlight. Like, what is, I guess, like, how has that created a new community for you across Europe? Like, what does the connections between those different groups look like now after creating the documentary?
Yeah, so when we started, I made the document to get together with my my good friend Aduna de Wever, and we already span 2 countries because they're in Belgium and I'm in the Netherlands, and very soon we brought Bratotti Roy on board. So she's our scriptwriter and this amazing researcher from Barcelona doing research on environmental justice, and together we already mapped out quite soon the threads we wanted to weave. So Bratotti is the one that pointed us to the Sami peoples and to the Serbian movements fighting against lithium. So she already immediately said from her research, if you want to talk about extractivism in Europe connected to green growth, you have to talk to their movements and learn about their resistance. And later we got in touch with the Italian ex-GKN collective. So it's this amazing collective of ex-Fiat car workers who all got ontslagen, got fired at the same day, and then decided to strike to not just keep their job, but to be able to re-industrialize the factory on their own terms, without managers, without external investors. And we've gone to these movements inside the documentary, and from the very first start we said, we don't come to you as journalists, we come to you as fellow activists. We want to show how you resist, we want to show the analysis, and beyond the documentary we will be working together too. So as of right now, we're working most closely with the GKN collective because they're in this wave of a campaign right now, and it's pretty amazing because we always hoped the movement would be a tool for organizing, and they've now already had like 40 screenings in Italy. So they used the movie to crowdfund for their campaign, and this is actually the biggest citizen shareholder campaign there's ever been in Italy, where any Italian person can kind of buy a share in the factory with which they hope to produce sustainable and locally made resources like cargo bikes. So we're really happy to see that. We're also working with the Serbian movement, but they're in a very different point. So we're working with Mladen and Buki in the Homolje Mountains, and they're very, you can see in the movie, it's a very, like, there's a huge movement in the Jadar Valley, but there's actually more mines being planned, and we wanted to show, these beginnings of resistance too. So, like, Mladen is just someone who lives close to the Homolje Mountains and wanted to protect these beautiful areas from being destroyed by the mine. And they're also right now using the movie to organize some screenings. So different stages, but the work is going on. And recently we've connected Mladen to Dario as well from the GKN collective. So we are trying to weave this network of movements, as well as actually all of the groups watching the movie. So we distribute the movie in a very grassroots way, because that's what we believe in most. And we hoped it would take off, but we could never imagine it would take off so much. At the start, we were still replying to everyone individually and saying like, oh, we can come speak. But now we've had it's been since October, so around half a year, and we've had 600 requests from all over the world. Yeah. And these are all the way from grassroots collectives to universities to larger organizations. And that's been giving me a lot of hope, and it's also been building this base for us that we hope to use for future campaigns on democratizing the economy. So it's making in a movement way, and now also distributing it in a movement way.
Yeah, I think I found that really impactful, just getting to go to the screening, getting to see it in person. Especially, I think you maybe mentioned in the panel conversation that one of the reasons it's nice to do it in person in a screening is it's a very like heavy emotional experience, and doing that like alone on your couch is completely different. And I'm curious, with all of these screenings that you've had, and I love the idea of the movie as like a part of an organizing tool. What has that experience been like for you, I guess, like emotionally, having all of these screenings over and over again in these conversations? Like, what has that been like?
Yeah, I was talking about the other day with a friend, because we were talking about feedback, and I said I've never had so much feedback in my whole life, because I have like at least one screening every week somewhere in the Netherlands, and then one screening I go to online, like checking in with people on Zoom. And I think it's teaching me that this fight for a better world will always be very pluriversal. So for every opinion I've had, there's been opinions towards the other side as well. And it's been good to see that, like, in real life, that the position we take in society determines so much how we look at the systems that shape current power dynamics. So, for example, I live in the Netherlands, and that's a very different place to live than in Poland right now, if you're talking about NATO and if you're talking about Russia. So I have had the response from a lot of people watching who are from Poland or from Ukraine that said, oh, you take such an anti-NATO perspective, but we also feel defended and are defended by NATO. So that's something I've had to sit with as well. Like, we still stand behind. It's very important to critique NATO, and NATO is still the biggest oppressor worldwide. But it's been reminding me, by meeting physically all these people taking different positions, that we meet people where they're at, and people are at very different places. And one other thing that's been really interesting is so our main target group is white European people that are part of the climate movement one way or another. And the climate movement has grown so big and so mainstream that there's a lot of people. And for the majority of people that watch the movie, it's a lot. They say it goes fast, there's a lot of information. But then we've actually heard from so many people that come from the majority world that there's nothing new in the movie. It's only repeating the things they already know. And I think that's been it's things I already assumed, but it's been good to see in real life just how big I think the gap still is in how all of us understand the world. And I've had to take a lot of lessons to now understand the world a little bit more decolonial and anti-capitalist. And there's probably still so many blind spots I have. But that's also something we've been grappling with. And we've actually gotten some really good feedback that we missed naming white supremacy more explicitly. So that's something that's the only feedback we've decided to work with. So we've made an edit to the movie and are now publishing this week an update on it. So that's why I thought it would be good to mention too, because it's still possible before to watch the movie as a white person and not think about white supremacy too much. And we think we want this movie, it is about growth, it's about the economy, but it's also challenging people to understand how their privilege and their way of living is connected to oppression in not just other parts of the world, but also other parts of Europe. That's always been the goal. So yeah, it's a conversation, right? Yeah. And the conversation doesn't end. And now this is the final edit. We're not going to make more edits.
It's done.
So now I always tell people, like, whatever critique they have, probably says something about what they are missing in the world right now and what they should be working on too. So some people are like, you miss the patriarchy, or you miss agriculture, and I'm like, oh, you're so right, and there's so many things to work on, and I would love to see the things you're doing with that and help in any way I can.
Yeah, it would take a lot longer of a film to cover all of the things.
Yeah, it would literally be impossible. It would be like there's all these interlaying power dynamics, and we have to talk about them, right? We wanted to make a movie that's like there's a lot of leftist movies in the art house genre, and they do incredible work in the more, I guess, subtle and artistic ways. But what we felt was missing sometimes was being more explicit. So to show capitalism, to show colonialism, and also name it as such.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious, like, were there any moments for you during the filming and creating that were like new realizations for you on how power dynamics are affecting, you know, maybe life specifically in Europe for different communities? Or was it all like for you, were you coming in being like, okay, I know all of this, I've experienced all of this, and I'm just shedding light onto it? Or were there any moments in the process of filming and creating the film that you had new realizations?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's about finding new words. Like I've known a lot of the words, but I guess about feeling them more deeply and connecting them to real people. So I remember a moment when I was talking to one of the key organizers in the Jadar Valley in Serbia, and she was explaining how, like, for a lot of people that live there, they literally say, over my dead body, that this mine will come there. And I could feel in her eyes that she meant it in a way that I hadn't met yet or hadn't felt in myself. And there's so much activism going on around the world, and activism I've been part of, but I think there's a fundamental difference to fight for your own life or your own livelihood or your own place, or to fight for more of an abstract concept of solidarity or the climate crisis. And I could sense that in the Serbian movement, I could sense that with Ida and Ella, with the Sami movement, I could sense that with Dario and the wider GKN collective, that there's this material dependence and this deeper connection to land that shaped their activism. And in a way, I'm jealous of that, because I'm born and raised here in Amsterdam, and as much as I feel like I want to defend Amsterdam, and I'm also always ambiguous to it, because it's a capitalist city. It's not like a land that I want to protect. So it just made me even more humble, I guess, in how my activism will always be, I guess, in support of and solidarity of those that are fighting more on the front lines. I say always, but I don't know, of course, where my future will go. But for now, that's the place I take, and I can amplify, and I can use my platform, and I can use my privilege, but I'm still in a fundamentally different position of my livelihood right now not being threatened.
Yeah, and I think that, like, emotional feeling and that, like, true, that your life is on the line and you are so committed to striving to protect, like, social and ecological justice is something that is really felt through the film, and something that I am really interested in, like, the power of art and film and storytelling to get those more abstract ideas to be real and to be felt, because it is a privilege and at times like a tool for ignorance to not feel any of these like injustices on like a personal level. Obviously you can map out how it all is affected, but I think that's something that I really felt the film did well, is to make you have like connection and the emotional connection to feel the reality of it. Which I think is really cool that you were able to capture that, and is something that I want to see more of, and I know there are more of, but I'm exploring myself of like, how is art shedding light onto these emotional realities that maybe we're missing when we just start scrolling and seeing like over headlines and briefs about it all, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. No, and I think there's a strange paradox in the way we consume what's going on in the world right now, because information has been more present than ever. So you can open your phone and literally see all of the crises in the world happening in real life. But that doesn't mean that is the format that it can actually emotionally sink. I would say rather the opposite. Because it's so ever available, it's making a lot of us numb. So I think that's the role and also the assignment of art, to create spaces in which we can let the world come in deeply and actually do something with it. Like, and and sometimes I'm more touched by a painting or by a song or a movie or a podcast than any information will ever be able to do.
Yeah.
That's the assignment.
The emotional connection with it rather than just the logical
exactly
understanding. Yeah. I think that's I agree. I think that's so important. I was curious, in the documentary, there was a scene at the new event where you were, I think you said something along the lines of, it's really nice to have included in the film or to see an example of something that people are creating, and that you wish to spend maybe more time, in addition to talking about the things that we need to stop and tear down, the systems we need to change, and also shed light on what we should be creating, and showing these examples of like living in collectivity. And I'm curious if there's been anything more recently that you've seen that has like inspired you and has shown a nice example of what we need to be creating, like people in practice creating these better forms of living and being.
Yeah, so I'm now, for the PhD, I've started doing a PhD a year ago, and I really focus on movements that are already prefiguring, so embodying the future they want to see, like the Nieuwe Meent. And I've recently had a conversation with Edo from Stroomgebied Veluwe, and they're doing really, really beautiful work where they're trying to build this kind of bioregion of people living in the Veluwe, and find out what their relationship is to the land and how they can localize production towards that region more. And he's been explaining that they've been spending the past 2 years just figuring out who they actually are together and what their relationship is to the land. And I think some of that work, the almost more spiritual work of being in community in a different way, that's the stuff that's inspiring me a lot right now. And that's very practical in places like the Nieuwe Meent, of practically living together, but then also on a larger scale, like for the municipality of Amsterdam. I know people are also now thinking and dreaming of how that could be a wider bioregion and what it would mean to be in relationship to the land. So I'm not super involved right now in more concrete protest activism, but I'm really spending a lot of my time thinking with and connecting with initiatives and movements that build alternatives, but still with an explicit political analysis behind it. And that's where I think the biggest potential lies right now, to start connecting those large groups of people that are maybe not even finding themselves in current political parties and current political movements, but have started localizing the economy. Energy cooperatives, it could be your auntie who just has a group of people with solar panels together, to start connecting them more with those protest movements that have done so much of the important work of raising issues on Palestine, raising issues on the climate crisis, on inequality, and really become more independent together from an economy that will just not work in the long term. Like, even if you ideologically don't agree with some of the anti-capitalist critiques, I think we can all sense and know that there will be financial crises again, and global supply chains, because of the climate crisis, will become more insecure. So I find there's a almost survival potential, as well as an ideological opportunity for building localized economies with a strong political focus. That's where a lot of my hope goes now.
Yeah, I love that. I only recently came across this concept of prefiguration, and I think it's a really cool idea of like, okay, putting into practice what you want to see, and also not depending on these kind of like failing government systems to give you like the care and the aid and the community that maybe we used to think we could rely on our government systems for. And I think what's nice, and maybe also similar to what you were mentioning earlier, is there's many ways, and there needs to be many ways to creating a better future. And so like prefiguration is one of those important ways, and then like the protesting and the pressure is also one of those ways, and then also the like a popularization of these ideas is necessary too, which is something that I think the cost of growth is like attempting to do, as well as it like reaches a larger audience. And I'm curious if you have like any advice for people who are maybe have just seen the cost of growth, or are kind of at an earlier stage of understanding the interconnectedness of these power dynamics and wanting to take part in collective action in some sort of way. What would you advise them on how they can like start this journey?
Yeah, so what's really helped me is to pick one thing that's already kind of emerging from my own networks and from my own surroundings, and then understand these wider power dynamics and systems through that. So I've started campaigning on sustainable and slow travel because that was something that emerged close to me, and it was also close to my own life. And through that, I learned a lot about the climate agreements and why the aviation industry was out. So that's something I usually advise to people. Like, you don't need to go very far to find a local struggle to connect to find a local initiative, and pick something that already fits with your personality, with your interests. So if you have a passion for food, then look into some of the amazing work that's going on in Amsterdam around community-supported agriculture. Join the initiative, and there you'll find people with whom you can learn. That's I think the most important. And if you're at the start of that journey, then learning by doing and learning by connecting with people with whom you can educate yourself outside of normal education systems, that's the very first things to do. And that won't be everything, but nothing will be everything.
Right.
But at some point you'll find, or at least at some point I found, that by doing enough of these things, I've started to feel this safety in my body of being part of of a more local and global network. And that's what I think more people are. If I talk to younger people or people more at the start, sometimes they think they're lacking knowledge or the best initiative or the best strategy, but I think what they're often lacking is just a sense of community with whom to figure that out together. And that's what drives me the most. I really believe in figuring out things together live in community. I don't know everything, and then every time I know a little bit, I find a group that knows that thing too, and we figure out the next step.
Yeah. I think that's something that I admired, like a conversation that happened during the Cost of Growth, reflecting on maybe already like some of the mistakes that you and your co-producer had made like earlier on in activism. And I think that ability that you're probably also practicing with feedback of recognizing, oh yeah, I'm a human being, and so I will make mistakes, and it's not about being perfect in how I'm showing up, but it's about listening to like the feedback and then continuing to improve. I think that's really nice because especially with like a hyper surveillance, people can like hold themselves back from trying because they don't want to make a mistake. And I think when you're in a community making community efforts, it's easier to make a mistake because it's not just you as an individual pursuing this thing, it's you all figuring it out together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and my favorite writer is the American facilitator and activist Adrienne Marie Brown, and she wrote this really wonderful book quite recently on loving corrections, and she talks a lot about how what is the difference between cancel culture on the one side and then giving loving feedback on the other side. And I think we really have to find a way to keep correcting each other, because there is so much to learn about the world and about privilege, about oppression, without falling into the trap of saying you need to be perfect to join already. And that will be the continual search for myself, and I hope that for everyone and anyone who feels inspired to take action in the world, they can find a space where to make those mistakes together.
I love that. Okay, we have one question that we ask at the end of all of our episodes, and it's kind of intentionally a difficult and impossible question, but if you could change one thing for a better world, it can be small, big, whatever, what would it be?
Yeah, what I believe in most, and that's why I am researching emotions and power right now, is that we need this sort of emotional revolution where we will all go beyond the numbness we feel right now and let the suffering in the world and the violence really come in. And I think all else will come from that. We first need to honor what's going on before we can take action and rehumanize ourselves a bit. Yeah. So feel it all. That's and not in a let's go do solo yoga by myself and then stay in that, but in a collective honoring the pain in the world way.
Feel it all.
Feel it all. That's it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I forgot to say that I'm Katia Eaton. I'm one of the hosts here at Rad-Ish. And Lena, it was so great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and thanks for all the great work.
Rad-Ish.